Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. I hope you're all doing well despite the less than ideal circumstances at the moment. Today I want to talk about something that kind of affects me being obviously being a university student during a pandemic, especially during being a first year at that. Uh, Now, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't expect it to be particularly easy being a university student. Like, you know, COVID was already a thing. We weren't going to turn around and suddenly be like, oh, it's disappeared now, there's no COVID, everything will go back to normal, because that's not what we expected at all. Um, and like we never expected all these things like sudden face-to-face teaching all the time. So, please don't come after me for that because, we were fairly realistic in our expectations, but I still think we've been very, very heavily let down by a lot of people. You know, I'm not trying to make this video for sympathy because I don't want you to feel sorry for us all because like I'm saying, we did basically know what we were getting into. I just want to try and explain it so you can maybe be a little bit more empathetic and try and understand where we're really coming from. So obviously, way back in the summer, everyone knew that each university was going to have like a slightly different approach as to how they were going to address learning. For example, University of Leeds, where I am attending currently, have um, told us that we were going to be having a blended learning approach where possible. And they stressed this that we should move into our accommodation. We should be in Leeds for the start of the academic term because we would be getting face-to-face lessons. And that made me pretty excited. I was pretty happy. Like I didn't expect to just have face-to-face lessons straight away. I didn't expect to be having constant face-to-face lessons. But me doing studying languages, they told us that one of your subject is in a way one of the more prioritized subjects because you have a smaller class size anyway, so you're more likely to have some face-to-face teaching. It's now the 14th of January, and I'm still yet to have anything on campus. So you can already see where there's some disparities between the claims and the actual truth. Um, I think certain universities that promised more face-to-face teaching than mine did. However, I think we were all promised some face-to-face teaching in at least some aspect. So to have not had a single face-to-face lesson since then, you know, already that sort to me sort of validates and constitutes some kind of change, reduction of fees or reduction of rent, etc., etc. Um, and obviously the pandemic was starting to improve a little bit. It was less than 1,000 cases per day, and less than we were in single-digit deaths, which it's still disgusting that we're having people die to this, but um, I think it was important to be measured in that. And to me, I think the government failed on a lot of things, including the secondary schools and primary schools. To me, I am paying for my education. I'm paying £9,250 a year for my education, plus the cost of rent and halls. I maybe thought, I don't know why I thought this, that the government would give us a little bit of priority and say, maybe we've got to be a lot tougher on the schools, or say that the schools should be doing also blended learning where they have online and stuff. Because apparently, according to figures, if the government did do that, then we would have been in a lot less in a bit of the shit right now. So, it's less than ideal. However, we just have to make do with it, I guess. Like the transmission rates for schools were fairly high, to be fair. Like I think it was something around 20% of all cases were coming from schools. I know for a fact my younger sibling, she was at a secondary school and they said that there was no social distancing in the classrooms, only masks in corridors, but the corridors were absolutely crowded during like out of lesson periods, and that they were allowed to mix with pretty much anyone during lunch times and break times, which I find completely ridiculous. Like, how come me as a student, I can't go into a class with 10 other people socially distanced with masks on, let's say, and have a lesson, but these students can mix with 30 others, no social distancing, no masks, and they're not even paying for their education. It just doesn't make much sense to me at all. I don't get why the government didn't do that, but hey ho. I mean, so let's go to the main topic of the video, which is this inevitable rent reduction. I put that in quotes. because it's not really a rent reduction if you actually take it into account. Now, I want to be clear that not everyone's circumstances are the same, and I understand it's not the easiest thing for the university to work out. However, I don't think telling certain groups that they can have a refund and certain groups that they can't is fair and just at all. I feel like that's disgusting. So let me just go over a little bit of a timeline of what happened. So the first thing that sort of happened was we had an Instagram account, cut the rent leads, because yeah, basically we us as students felt like we were being shafted by them. Uh, it was basically, so the whole account was created and we wanted to make a petition. For example, here we could attend in-person learning. There was never actually in-person lecture or seminar, which is true of my course. Uh, and some people, yeah, there's another thing. People in their accommodations haven't had access to facilities that they were promised. So, just for example, at my accommodation, it's one of the older buildings, so and it's more of an Oxford style, so they tend to have how would I put it? They have like balls and formal things that are included with the price of your rent that you're paying to the university. Because I'm living in a university owned accommodation right now, um, but obviously that's not possible. And we're not blaming the university and saying you should be hosting this or you should be giving this experience. We're just saying we don't feel that the experience we're receiving is proportional to the amount we're paying. That's the problem. We're paying as much as every other year of students is paid and getting half or even less a half of an experience. So obviously, like they're saying, there's a multitude of failings in terms of the handling of the situations. Uh, there was another thing all about the food parcels and uh, students not being able to get things during periods of self isolation. There was a big problem with that too. I'm not going to cover that though because that's kind of going away from the point. Um, we did the cut the rent group did start actually speaking to the university union and they were applying for a 30% rent reduction, like it says here, and allowing students to exit their contract at any time without facing financial penalties, which I don't feel is unfair. Certain students haven't lived here since October, so they shouldn't have to still pay rent for somewhere they're not living. I know it doesn't normally work like that in the real world, but these aren't normal circumstances. And if students can't live where they're paying for, and the university's happily just taking that money away from them, it's just not fair. It's not fair at all. So this petition did actually get, oh, it's almost got 5,000 signatures right now. It's not as popular as the first was because, or they also have various other social media pages. I suggest if you're a University of Leeds student, that you check them out at Cut the Rent LDS, same on Facebook, and also the same on Instagram. However, you know, there is also an announcement that the university made. This came out about a week ago, according to the article, and said that they're announcing rent refund for students in uni accommodation. Um, so they said they're not a university-owned accommodation like me. Um, are not not sure on the exact details. Uh, Now it says recently students have been told not to return to the University of Leeds until further notice. Now, basically, I want to sort of explain what this meant because the university basically sent out an email saying that 90% of the facilities at the university are going to be closed. Like there's only one or two libraries open, and that's it. And you need to test negative twice in a row or whatever with lateral flow tests before you can actually use these facilities. That's all well and good. Um, Now they said students should not return until further notice. Now underneath that there was a line in the email that said that we understand that students should not return. However, if there is exceptional circumstances or lack of study space, etc., students are welcome to return. And we obviously know that there's going to be a volume of students that are doing that. So if the university has said that, then how come now? Let's go to this email that they sent us. That they've sent out this refund thing. You will not be eligible to apply for this refund if you have remained in or have returned to live in our accommodation during the stated period. Now, I'm going to be honest. I didn't expect it. I didn't come back here because I was like, oh, I'm not bothered about a rent reduction because I did want a rent reduction. I came here because my mental health at home and my inability to study at home was killing me physically and mentally. It was difficult. It was so, so difficult. And I said, I have to go back to here. I have to come back to my accommodation. Otherwise, there's no way I'm gonna, like, my mental health's just gonna go to tatters and I'm gonna start failing everything. Which the university actually deemed as an acceptable circumstance to return. But now they're saying that I can't have any rent reduction because I've moved back due to exceptional circumstances. I'm not saying that I should receive a full 40% refund or 30% or whatever the cut the rent was campaigning for. However, to suddenly disqualify me from any sort of refund because I've had to move back due to exceptional circumstances is ridiculous. Like, and also think about the international students who've had no choice but to stay here the entire time. Are they not worthy of a refund? Their fees are nearly twice, three times what ours are, and they are not getting anything. And you're telling me this is fair? I, I don't understand the massive. It's just such a disappointment from a university. I was expecting it to be at least, I was expecting it to be at least somewhat compassionate. But basically, a while back they sent out a groveling email, basically saying we'll give you the rent refund, etc., whatever for this period, like what I've just shown you. Um, but please bear in mind it's costing us a lot of money, and we've not had any government funding. Universities get nearly a billion, like it's 700 and something million pounds a year in budget. I read on Wikipedia. Um, and you're telling me that they can't give back, a couple of million here and there to the students that are actually funding their entire university as is. I I don't understand. They've already taken our money. It's not that they don't. It, they're not spending it as much as they normally would be, are they? Because they aren't providing the same level of, well, there's no events, there's no uh things going on campus. They could effectively shut campus down because there's no one there, and it would save them a lot of money. But then there's no way they're spending as much on budget as they are as they have been in previous years. So why do they need to take the full amount of money off us? That's what I don't understand. So going back to that, Cut the Rent did actually make a statement. They have been angered, and in fact, they are hoping to undergo some kind of rent strike if nothing happens. Um, so his basic thing fails to take into account last term's travel window, as opposed to uh, we were told that whenever the tests, basically, so to put it in perspective, we could get tests from the 30th of November up until the 11th of December, I think. And that was the window that we had for testing. You had to have two tests within 3 days of each other. And if you had just two negative tests within 3 days, on the second negative test, you had 24 hours to leave Leeds. How is that fair? And especially considering most of us weren't planning to come home until the end of term anyway. But people were effectively being forced out because they couldn't get tests outside of that period. But bearing in mind the tests themselves were a pain to get a hold of. They weren't easy to get a hold of, so it was even worse. Um, yeah, only those who have not returned or have in-person teaching are receiving the rebate. So people who have in-person teaching and have returned to accommodation will still get the rebate. But people who have returned who don't have face-to-face teaching, whether it be because they couldn't get Wi-Fi at home, or I don't know, like me, they had problems at home when they couldn't study. They are just not. We're just being discarded. Like made. It's not. We don't get that anymore. We don't get it. I don't understand. I really can't understand this. Um, and also, it's a bit of a less strong point in my opinion, but certain students did already plan to come back before lockdown, before all of this, unknowing to the fact that they were suddenly going to be excluded. So I feel like it's unfair that they're suddenly excluding groups. It should either be for everybody or for no one. That's how it should work, in my opinion. So they've sort of updated the terms, and I agree the fact of making the terms extreme, and then the university will be more likely to make a this sort of compromise than going in with reasonable things and the university negotiating down and down until it's not even barely worth it anymore. So 40% reduction in rent for time spent in halls, that's fair enough. I feel 40%. Personally, because I've had to move back and I have sort of been living here for a couple of days, I would not be against a slightly reduced rent reduction for people who have indeed had to move back. For whatever reason that may be, I don't mind if it's 25 or 20 or 30% rather than 40, because I feel like that would be fair. However, to say that we don't get any at all is not fair at all. Another one, freedom to exit contracts on financial legal penalties. I mean, it's a bit more of a tricky one because when you sign that contract, you are effectively saying, regardless of whether I'm here or not, I will be paying for it. But the fact that people are paying for places that some have never moved into, or some people have lived in for a week or two, isn't just. Because they were told to move in, and then when they found out they weren't getting the teaching they were promised, they moved out. But now they're saying, well, that's not our problem. You've still got to pay the same amount of money, which isn't fair. It's just really, really unfair. Um, yeah, and obviously they're considering a rent strike. Now, I've never, I don't really know what a rent strike's about, so I can't personally talk about it. But I think it would be, it's a very real possibility if students who have indeed moved back to halls don't receive anything at all, even those in exceptional circumstances. In my opinion, it's either everybody or no one. You can't half-ass it and say, well, only certain students are going to get it and certain students won't. It has to be a collective. It's not, it's a university thing. It's not just a certain group. It's a bit discriminatory in my opinion, and I don't think it should be allowed to go. Hence why this rent strike is being planned. And I hope the university does respond adequately because I'm not out here trying to witch hunt them, but there's a very small, well, they at least have to take some responsibility for what's going on right now, because for the majority of us it just isn't good enough, and we're just frustrated that we aren't getting anything, any support, any help, anything like that. It's just not right. Yeah, sorry about this big long rant. But I feel like this is the best way for me to talk about it. I'm gonna be making more sorts of videos like this that are just sort of explaining things or giving my opinion on stuff that are all just long form rant style sort of things. I might end up doing some live stuff if I can. But yeah, hopefully this has helped you understand a little bit more about the situation we all find ourselves in, because all the university students, because it is difficult. And I don't expect you to suddenly be like, oh my God, we're being treated so unfairly. I just want you to try and understand a little bit about, oh, maybe this isn't as fair. Maybe this isn't, maybe these students were duped a little bit into thinking these sorts of things. And you can call us stupid for believing them, but what's the point in not hoping for positive things? There's no point in going into everything being negative, you know what I mean? There's got to be some sort of positivity in there at some point, especially considering the pandemic at that point wasn't as bad as it is now. So, yeah, I'm not going to say any more because I feel like I've rambled for long enough already. So, yeah, all I'm going to say is I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you've understood and, sort of being able to experience what it's a bit what it's like being a university student right now. Yeah, any questions, please feel free to ask. I can either answer them in a video or I'll just reply as a comment. And yeah, I hope to see some of you in the next video. Goodbye.